Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Martin Luther King and use the LA leaked audio scandal to kind of set the stage. What I heard from Nuri Martinez was that she thought Mike Bonin was buying access to places he wouldn't otherwise have access to, a black and brown float. She also said that he was doing it through tokenism, accessorizing himself with that black adopted child. That's the reference to the Louis Vuitton bag. When she said the child was being unruly and, possibly messing up the float, she compared it to raising him as a white kid. In the black and brown communities, I've heard it in both places. Lavelle Crawford, a black comedian, does a stand-up set on this. That's pretty funny. And less funny is, this rapper Sugar Free talking about, you see your kid tearing up my shit and won't tell him to quit? Nah. And then he's going to crack him. So it is the way people talk in our communities. And it doesn't mean they want to commit literal violence towards someone. And I think that's important to understand because it's a cultural difference that could get someone in trouble. Now, Nuri made a lot of other comments that disqualify her from the benefit of the doubt, so this is not intended to defend her. But a brown man or a black man telling their kid, I'm going to kick your ass when we get home, could be misinterpreted by someone not from that community as a threat of literal violence and then end up in jail or some bullshit because of cultural misunderstandings, cultural differences. In our culture, we have the cinto, which is the belt, or the chancla. I've heard black folks talk about the switch. They had to go get a switch to get hit with. And in the Bible, they talk about the rod of discipline. It doesn't mean literally hitting. Discipline could be being with your kids every day and just keeping them on track doing the right things. Discipline is being consistent to achieve a goal and has nothing to do with hitting. So I think that's just important to say because I would hate for someone from my community to get crossed up for speaking in a way that is culturally acceptable in a lot of places and that being misunderstood by folks who think they are literally going to hit their kids. So that's what that was about. So we have that. She said he's buying access to places he doesn't belong. He's using this black kid for that and not providing this kid with the discipline that he needs such that it could be harmful to him later in life. See, a black kid and a white kid who commit the same act in a school that is unacceptable, statistics show that black kid is more likely to be suspended, more likely to be expelled. Those are the statistics. Black kids get suspended more often for the same things as white kids. And so, in addition to that, as mentioned, I don't want people coming to my house and tearing up my shit, and they'll be less welcome if they do. Some of her comments, I think, were in the interest of that kid and attacking Mike Bonin. But again, she's said a lot that disqualifies her from the benefit of the doubt. This would be if it was someone else. I also heard that in Bonin doing that, there was a sense of entitlement to being there. Because I would not go to your house and let my kids fuck your shit up. I wouldn't. I've gone to parties, and after the parties, homeboys come out, and they're like, to my kids, hey, I saw these kids tearing shit up, and although you were playing and having fun, you wouldn't engage in the tearing shit up of my house. You're always welcome here. And so she was complaining about his right to be on that black and brown float, implying she had a right to be on it. And after what she said, I don't think she did either. And most importantly, my understanding is that that conversation was ultimately about disenfranchising voters for their own benefit. And a lot of them were black voters. So that's the real racism there. Not the name calling. The real racism is that attempt to disenfranchise. The name calling just shows their disregard for these people, which makes it okay for them to disenfranchise them for their own personal gain. The sad thing about all this, beyond what we already know, is that that float was in a Dr. Martin Luther King parade. And I've seen, local politicians here in those parades, Cinco de Mayo, 16th of September, they're in the back of lowriders, waving to people, tokenizing, our holidays, our cultural celebrations for political gain. And these are people that look like me. Now, again, the sad thing is that the comments revolve around who had more right to be on that black and brown float. Part of the comments. The other comments, again, there's a lot there. But part of the comments came down to who had more right to be on that black and brown float in a Dr. King parade, when nobody really had a right. Besides what she said about Mike Bonin, there was a black public comment during the city council meeting that basically accused him of being as racist as anyone else. You can adopt a black kid and be racist still. I mean, I don't know how people don't understand that. That it would be shallow to think you can't. And then I read, journalism pieces from Venice that said as much as well about him. But this isn't about him. This is about Dr. King. And hopefully everything I've said sets the stage. So Dr. King wrote a letter from the Birmingham, Alabama jail. And it's known as the letter from the Birmingham jail. It's also known as the black man is your brother. He uses a term for black men from back in the day. I won't use it. So I'll say the black man. And I would say that in large part, you could also just use people of color now. And in that letter, he also mentions white moderates. At the time the letter was written, I would guess that every member of every city council, every supervisor on the board of supervisors, every mayor, every governor, every attorney general, every assemblyman, every congressman, every senator was white. Maybe there was an exception or two. My guess is that it was almost entirely white. I was in 7th grade when the first Latino mayor of a major American city was elected. So, and that was after Martin Luther King. So today, I would say that when he says the white moderate, you can take that as the liberal Democrat. And for the record, I've never once thought Trump was a leader for me. I've not ever identified as a conservative. I believe in policies that help support liberal ideals and goals like equity and justice, fairness, and then, godly goals like kindness, empathy, and the good. And for me, I think conservatism and Trumpism specifically would be the modern day White Citizens Council or Ku Klux Klaner. That's just my beliefs. And again, it's no longer The white label you can take out. You know, when you say White Citizens Council, you might as well say the Nationalist American Council. The Ku Klux Klaner, the Nationalist. And there's black folks in there, there's Mexican folks, there's Chicanos, there's white folks, there's Asian folks. All part of that coalition. That would be Dr. King's Ku Klux Klaner or White Citizens Council. The white moderate is the liberal Democrat. It's the Compton City Council. It's the LA City Council. It's the Sacramento City Council. It's the San Francisco City Council. That's the white moderate to date, right? And so Dr. King, in his letter, he expressed frustration with both liberal Democrats and he said, shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. And he said regarding, the communities of color that you don't need to follow the do-nothingism of the complacent. Those who tell you racism doesn't exist, that everything's okay, they got a job, they made it, there's nothing wrong. You don't need to follow them. Nor the hatred and despair of the black nationalists. And again, you can erase black and white from this, just the nationalists. You listen to the nationalists, they're telling you that we're being invaded and the sky is always falling. And it's someone's fault, and it's anyways, I won't digress too far. And so in my experience, he was saying that the same people fighting over who had more right to be on a float honoring him are the same people that frustrated him. He says that in addition to that, he says it's not the Ku Klux Klan or the White Citizens Council that has been the greatest stumbling block for the black man in his quest for freedom. It has been the white moderate. And then he goes on to the shallow understanding. So, as mentioned, I see myself having liberal views. I support policies that are about equity, justice, and what have you. And I don't spend my time calling out Trump supporters and conservatives. I figure they just soon as anything spit in my face because there's ill will based on I'm an immigrant, based on a lot of other things. I spend most of my time calling out people that are supposed to be my friends. People who go to marches and protests because I think they have a shallow understanding. And I try to teach them, and the more I teach them, the more I see them posing with politicians and holding up kudos from politicians and giving politicians praise. And they're my stumbling blocks. Trump conservatives have nothing to do with my fights here for equity and justice. Zero to do with my fights here for equity and justice. It's Democrats, people that look like me. And I once quoted Dr. King in a governmental process that was founded in equity and justice. And the people that everyone looks at as champions of equity and justice in those circles all went against me for quoting Dr. King, for saying justice delayed is justice denied. See, Dr. King also said that these people in power set the timetable for other people's freedom from oppression, and it's never convenient for them. It's always tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. And every tomorrow is a day that oppressed people suffer injustices. I I was blown away because the people that came against me wasn't the Ku Klux Klan or the White Citizens Council. It was black people. It was Coco's grandma with her, oh, you like tortillas too, and trying to be all friendly, and really their first identity is the government. You know how people say once you put on the police uniform, you're no longer black, you're white, or Mexican, you're blue. You're a blue life now. And the same applies to people in government. People in the nonprofit sector. They will not call out their allies if they're doing wrong to the same people they're claiming to protect. That's why Nori and Bonin, despite what black people say about him in Venice, were up there on the black and brown float honoring Dr. King. They weren't honoring Dr. King because their actions don't honor Dr. King. They were tokenizing an event for credibility. Now, I think this is a good time to close because I made the point about the hypocrisy. I made the point about, I think, these false idols of equity and justice, equality, fairness that the government and nonprofits lift up. They lift themselves up. And they have these lofty positions. Like I said, I had a lofty position and I don't because I wanted to be for the community, not for myself. And Dr. King does say that, I'll get to that. But the folks that had a problem with me quoting Dr. King are all being celebrated as the harbingers of equity and justice. Believe that. Those are the motherfuckers up on the Martin Luther King parade float, waving to you and saying some fucked up shit behind your back to disenfranchise you, to deny you services, to suit the agenda of their bosses, whatever it may be. They're no longer brown, they're no longer black, they're no longer Asian. They are the government. I have a clip from LA City Council's public comment where, this brother comes to the mic and says, I heard from my Latino brother that Latinos can't be the face of racism. Well, neither can blacks. Because once you guys get in there, you get comfortable and you become part of it. I love that comment because it's been real in my experience. And so I think a lot of these folks are false idols of equity and justice. But usually it's the most prominent people being celebrated the most. It's part of the status quo. That's real shit. Now, I'm going to try really hard to not cry while I read this. And in fact, I might even black out the camera because it's very moving for me. But Dr. King talks about what the heroes will look like. So let me read this for you. One day the South will recognize its real heroes. There will be the James Merediths, with the noble sense of purpose that enables them to face jeering and hostile mobs, and with the agonizing loneliness that characterizes the life of the pioneer. There will be the old, oppressed, battered black women, symbolized in a 72-year-old woman in Montgomery, Alabama, who rose with a sense of dignity and with her people decided not to ride segregated buses, and who responded with ungrammatical profundity to one who inquired about her wariness. She said, "My feet is tired, but my soul is at rest." There will be young high school and college students, the young ministers of the gospel, and a host of their elders, courageously and nonviolently, sitting in at a lunch counter and willing to go to jail for conscience sake. One day the South will know that when these disinherited children of God sat down at lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for what is best in the American dream and for the most sacred values in our Christian heritage, thereby bringing our nation back to those great wells of democracy. So, that's what your heroes are going to look like. The old tired black lady who would rather walk and ride a segregated bus. People who'd rather sacrifice and be alone than go along with the bullshit. Have a good one, man.